Grand Tour. We'd like to welcome everyone for tuning in this evening to tonight's event, which is on protecting biodiversity, the role of engineers. The Sustainability Grand Tour is a webinar series by Engineers Ireland based on a collaboration of many of our regions, divisions and societies. And it presents an opportunity to explore the role of engineers in developing more sustainable cities and communities. My name is Richard Manton. I'm the Deputy Registrar and Policy Officer at Engineers Ireland. I'm delighted to say a few words to open this event on biodiversity. This event has been put together by some of Engineers Ireland sectors, the West region, the Southeast region, and the Energy and Environment Climate Action Division. So with that, I'd just like to acknowledge the input from the other speakers here today, from Laurence Lett, Siobhán Kennedy, and Will Woodrow, who we're delighted to be joined by from the Chartered Institute of Ecology and Environmental Management. So this event stems from Engineers Ireland's declaration of a climate and biodiversity emergency, which was made by then President of Engineers Ireland, Marguerite Sayers, on the 4th of March 2020. And that followed a motion that was passed by the Council of Engineers Ireland and declared by Marguerite on World Engineering Day for Sustainable Development. That stated that climate breakdown and biodiversity collapse are the most serious issues of our time. The planet has ecological limits and a finite biocapacity, and a paradigm shift is required to realign humanity's ecological footprint within this capacity. Engineers Ireland is adding our voice to those of professional bodies and other organisations around the world by declaring a climate and biodiversity emergency. Engineers Ireland members will take action to address the impact of the climate and biodiversity emergency. In this most important of missions, we will collaborate with scientists, environmentalists, government, their advisors, public service, and other professions and civil society. As a professional body with 25,000 members, we will act as a leading voice for sustainability, and we note the environmental and social obligations of our Code of Ethics. So building on that declaration, which took place just over a year ago now, Engineers Ireland has undertaken a programme of work really to activate our commitment to sustainability, action and climate and biodiversity. One aspect of that was a survey that we undertook of the members of Engineers Ireland, as well as a poll of the public where we asked the question whether they agree with the statement that engineers have an ethical responsibility to tackle climate change and biodiversity loss. That was a resounding agree from both engineers, where 88% agreed with the statement, as well as from the public. And when we looked into the responses from the public, we found that those with a connection to engineering, so that includes those who work in an area related to engineering, study engineering, or have a relative who work in or study engineering, again, that 84% of those agreed. And you'll find more information about those in our publication, Engineering 2020. Then we took a deeper dive then into the results for Engineers Ireland members to see if there was much of a variation across the gender, across discipline of engineering, or the experience in terms of number of years since they qualified. I'm really glad to say that that was very strong across all of those demographics, that really almost all cohorts of our membership agree that engineers do have an ethical responsibility to tackle climate change and biodiversity loss. Next slide there, please. Then late last year, Engineers Ireland, approved by our council, adopted a sustainability framework to bring together our actions on climate change and biodiversity loss. That's built around 4 different pillars about how we learn, live, lead, and link on the area of sustainability. I'm delighted to say I think we've made an awful lot of progress over that past year, including series like the Sustainability Grand Tour, as well as those other actions in the Learn, Live, Lead and Link sections. And I'd just like to highlight that link section, how really important it is for us as a professional body to be collaborating across the disciplines of engineering, across our sectors, and collaborating with other professional bodies and sectors of society. And I think today's event is one perfect example of that. So with that, I'd like to hand you over to the rest of our speakers, first of which is Siobhán Kennedy. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. I'm Siobhán Kennedy. I'm a member of the West Region Committee, and I've been involved in this piece of work on biodiversity, and I'll just be giving an introduction to the work we've been doing and the context of the biodiversity crisis. So I suppose the first thing to highlight is that, like climate breakdown, the biodiversity crisis is a global issue. So the image on the left is from The Guardian. It's an article from September 2020, which just highlights that globally we're failing to meet the goals that were set in 2010. And those strategic goals are on the right there. I won't read through them, but if you want more information, you can go to the website there. Next slide, thanks. So in Ireland, we have the National Biodiversity Action Plan. You can see the vision there on the left-hand side of our vision for biodiversity as set out in that plan. And then on the right-hand side, I extracted some text from the plan and just highlighted some of the sort of key words, just to highlight why biodiversity is so critical, particularly around our food, water, clean air, pollination, soil fertility. So it's really critical. In November 2020, the EPA published the State of the Environment report, and I suppose it was quite shocking, really, that the kind of message there was that we don't fully understand the impact of the destruction of nature that's happening, and as you can see, we may not fully understand its impact until it's too late. In February 2021, so just this year, the National Biodiversity Forum prepared a report which showed a very disturbing picture of losses and declining trends in biodiversity in Ireland. And I suppose they also highlighted that the biggest transgressor of environmental law in Ireland is the state. In March of this year, there was a lot of media coverage around the rise in the number of dead whales and dolphins washing up on our shores. We have a commitment to designate 10% of our seas as marine protected areas and to end overfishing by 2020. But as of last month, we had designated just 2.3% of our vast marine area for protection. Next slide there. And then from last month, Birdwatch Ireland published their latest review of the birds of conservation concern, which was an alarming report with a 46% increase in the number of red listed species. And the image on the right there you can see is just showing the decline in the number of breeding curlew in Ireland. So since the 1980s, there's been a 96% decline in breeding curlew in Ireland, which is really shocking, but just one indicator of the biodiversity crisis. In the Joint Oireachtas Committee on Climate Action, there was a number of biodiversity experts who presented on the situation. And as you can see from the headlines there, again, they warned the sort of level of the situation that we're in. But I suppose I would also highlight that they did discuss that there are solutions there and there are things we can do, but the situation is quite serious. So members of the West Region, the Southeast Region and the Energy, Environment and Climate Action Division got together and we set up a few objectives. So as you can see them there, so identify issues related to engineering and biodiversity, document case studies. We were particularly looking for case studies of examples where engineering work had positively contributed to protecting biodiversity, identifying potential solutions and ways that Engineers Ireland as the institution and then our members can support this, and collecting relevant references and resources. So far we've had consultations with the EPA, with Coastwatch, with the National Parks and Wildlife Services, Inland Fisheries Ireland, the Irish Peatland Conservation Council, the NUIG Hedgehog Survey Team, and Irish Wildlife Trust. We've also had a number of responses through a survey that we set up for ecologists and environmental specialists working in the engineering and construction sector. And we're very grateful to CIEEM and ESAI for their help with that. And then we've also had consultations with local authority heritage officers, biodiversity officers across a number of counties around Ireland. Yeah, so that's the introduction. I'm very pleased to hand over to Laurence now, who's going to run through the initial findings from the consultation so far. Thanks, Laurence.
Siobhán. Laurence Lett is my name. I'm a member of the South East Region of Engineers Ireland, and I work with the Wexford County Council. In this section, I'll go through a brief introduction, and we'll move on to the emerging issues that arose, then on to the key issues. We'll look at some case studies, and finally then we'll go on to the recommendations that are shaped up through the consultation process. Okay, I suppose as the introduction, the initiative was very well received. There was positive discussions with an emphasis on opportunities. All the organisations and individuals who took part in the consultation were interested to engage further with Engineers Ireland and their members to support biodiversity. However, I suppose the situation is pretty dire in terms of the biodiversity crisis. But generally, the feeling seemed to be that working collaboratively, there is a potential for the engineering sector to have a much more positive contribution, and that engineers could be change champions in the area as we interact with such a diverse, wide audience each day. Further engagement will be discussed more in recommendations later. Okay, let's see from the second slide here, but need to take biodiversity and the biodiversity crisis seriously. In terms of this, the feeling was that biodiversity is viewed as a constraint, something to be dealt with as easily as possible and somewhat dismissed. Previous slides have demonstrated that a majority of public and engineers feel engineers have responsibility to address climate breakdown and biodiversity loss. Biodiversity is not a constraint and not a box-ticking exercise. No net loss. No net loss. Protecting biodiversity needs to be discussed at concept stage with the experts in their field and to draw on their knowledge in order to bring about a sustainable development. Ecologists are often brought in once the design has been relatively fixed. This ties into our next point on multidisciplinary teams and engagement. Collaborative and meaningful engagement collaborative and meaningful engagement will lead to better designs, more comprehensive design process. And the need to ask, how do we draw on biodiversity expertise at local level where the project can be implemented? And another question that was raised, how do we engage with environmental concerns? This came up in many consultations and survey returns. I suppose the starting point for this is heritage officers, biodiversity officers, who can play a vital role here at the point of contact for local authority projects in particular. On the next slide, we're going to look at the IAA process, which are very much front-loaded and limitation to monitoring accountability. This came up again in many consultations that although environmental impact assessments and appropriate assessments are front-loaded, there's limitation of monitoring being raised for large-scale projects to ensure compliance. Environmental destruction may happen because of a lack of understanding, or rather than willful. Raising awareness is key. Developers driving diversity. Developers deciding on the quality and location of replacement habitat is not enough. It doesn't give enough oversight for ecologists into the process. With developers driving it, ecologists have limited input and impact. Habitat loss, fragmentation. This came up in almost all of the consultations. It was highlighted that replacement habitat often doesn't make up for the one that is lost because they're not of similar value. For example, a hedgerow, which connects into the wider landscape forming wildlife corridors, is removed and replaced with a circle of trees in the middle of the site, so there's no linkage. Nature-based solutions came up numerous times also. Engineers need to have a better understanding of what nature-based solutions actually means. Particularly important was coastal and river areas, where culverts are more often than not undersized and do not replicate the original river cross-sectional area, thus an increase in flows which fish and eels find hard to navigate through these barriers, thus causing impediments on their migration upstream to spawn. Then there was the need to look at the potential to use natural wetlands in storm events to act as natural attenuation. This would be great to see Engineers Ireland growing awareness in the engineering world on the value of natural and nature-based solutions. Legal obligations. Legal obligations, the need to ensure that the integrated design team is clear what legal obligations are required to comply with their planning, design and construction stages. Construction management, time of the year, taking into account nesting season, migration times, infrastructure lighting, invasive species. Often there's insufficient consideration and management given to this at times. River maintenance, river barriers, bridge maintenance, drainage works, not sufficient engagement. Stronger certification and post-project evaluation is required. In terms of wastewater capacity, the capacity should take into account seasonal surges on infrastructure, ensuring surrounding biodiversity is not compromised. Not enough future proofing was found coming out of the survey on major infrastructural projects, perhaps due to restricted financial budgets. But the result is that the infrastructure is very quickly overwhelmed and nature pays the price. We need to ensure that design considers surge capacity. Brownfield development. We have to consider green space design and how to ensure best possible design for people using green space, but also ensuring that it works for biodiversity. Move on to some case studies now. About the first example was when the MPWS worked in collaboration with Transport and Infrastructure Ireland, BAM, the contractor, and local authorities in Wicklow, where they used trail cameras, telemetry, and marking of the actual individual animals to identify their desire lines. So the original design included a number of mammal underpasses, and working in collaboration with MPWS, but the contractor, TII, and local authority engineers were able to reduce the overall number, thus a cost saving for the contractor. And monitoring of the mammal underpasses has found that the results are very positive. Improvements to fencing are also made for species such as deer. And here's one from our own county, Wexford. This is one that was kind of titled "Life is on the Edge." And in this project, the signpost will be recognisable by the project slogan, "Life lives on the Edge," an initiative which aimed to highlight the importance of road verges and hedgerows as crucial corridors for wildlife. The photo actually is from Scarwalsh and Scarty, where it was one of the pilot areas. And there's numerous other areas along the N25 corridors, such places as Cross the Beck and Cathode in County Wexford. Room for the River. Room for the River was the Dutch government programme to tackle and manage high water levels in rivers due to high discharges associated with climate change. That's it's a great initiative by the Dutch government and well worth a read. And that will feature in the issues paper, which will be issued toward the end of May. Now we're on to the case study of the Green Bridge on the M17. So that was Ireland's first ever bat bridge constructed over the new Galway motorway. And it developed to ensure continuity for the bat species to and from the roost areas and feeding areas. And the reference documents. Reference documents that we have here in front of us on the screen, these came up through consultation and identified a wide range of guidelines and reference documents. And the issued paper, which will be published, as I say, at the end of May, will provide a full list of the guidance documents identified. And many thanks to everyone who consulted with us and recommended this documentation. On to the recommendations that came then from these discussions and the consultation process. Okay, so the first one, field trips for engineers and biodiversity. right, the collaboration between with Engineers Ireland, the South East region, the West region, and the ecology and environmental groups is key. The organisation of field trips in the summer, if COVID restrictions allow, to supplement online events and encourage active engagement. Numerous offers of help in this area from those who participated was very much forthcoming and welcome. CBD training courses for engineers and biodiversity. We need to keep engineers up to date on biodiversity, knowledge, guidelines, and the likes. Raising awareness on biodiversity in the engineering sector. Raising awareness is very diverse, but it could include things like engaging environmental groups and organisations, experts that would come forward to talk at some of the STEPS Week's events, webinars, sharing of resources, reference documents, and sharing case studies. The support for the delivery of actions. In encouraging engineering employers to implement biodiversity measures to support staff who want to volunteer with engineering organisations, provide training and raise awareness of the National Biodiversity Action Plan. Recommended that Engineers Ireland will engage with the media, and a nice project, I suppose, that came up during discussions was possible funding of an EcoEye episode to raise awareness and highlight the work of engineers in the area. And it's a great way to get discussions on engineering issues into the public domain. Also, it would be good to have engineers awards geared towards recognising excellence in terms of engineers who are protecting biodiversity. So I suppose to close off on that one, the key words from this are collaboration, engagement, and if in doubt, don't be afraid to ask to enable an informed decision to be made. So a huge thanks to everyone who took the time to contribute. As I say, an issued paper will issue at the end of May. And for any additional input that anyone would like to have, they can indeed share that with either myself or Siobhán Kennedy. Our emails there are at the top of the screen. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you across to Mr. Woodrow. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Many thanks for inviting me to talk this evening on behalf of CIEEM, the Chartered Institute of Ecology and Environmental Management. I'd like to introduce myself. My name's Will Woodrow. I'm the Vice President of CIEEM, meaning that I sort of lead on issues in Ireland, across the island of Ireland, including the Republic and Northern Ireland. And this is a role that I fulfill on a voluntary basis. I'm actually a consultant ecologist. I run a team of 20 people based up in Sligo. So that's my background, and I've been working in this field. I was just totting it up there for 4 years shy of 40 years, which is a bit worrying. Anyway, many thanks for having me. Very excited to be talking to you on the Engineers Island Sustainability Grand Tour. Sounds very exciting. I'd love to be on it. Of course, we're all in our spare bedrooms, but don't let that sort of put you off at all. Very interesting introduction there from the various people, and there were 3 things I wrote down from that. Just three points that came up. Ethical responsibility for action, paradigm shift needed, and exciting opportunity for the engineering sector. And really what I'm hoping from the talk that I'm going to give today, and there will certainly be a lot of overlap with what Laurence has said, but what I'm hoping is that this is the start of more formalized, proper collaboration between our disciplines, because I started in this area of work in 1985, and we're still talking about the same things that we were then. But now there is a clear understanding that there is a need for commitment to action to resolve the issues that we're looking at. Okay. So really what I want to talk about tonight, the things I'm going to be covering are, I want to talk to you just very briefly about the CIEEM background and its members, for those people of Engineers Ireland who aren't aware. I want to talk about the climate emergency and biodiversity crisis from a CIEEM perspective, again, briefly. I'm not going to go over all the issues that people have talked about on the need for action. I want to really be talking about this, which is looking forward to solutions. And I want to talk about collaboration, and I want to talk about what the next steps are. So those are the sorts of things I want to cover, and I'm hoping that this will be, that there'll be a lot of questions come in, that we can actually start a conversation here tonight. And I'm also hoping that we'll start a more formalized conversation collaboration in the future. So in terms of the CIEEM membership in Ireland, we have 351 members covering the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. We have a number of different membership categories. I think it's worth saying that that falls into a wider membership across Britain and Ireland of 6,000. So, but we are very much a growing membership in Ireland. We have 51 student members, 84 qualifying members, and then we have associated members, full members, 168. And then we also offer a chartership, and we have 42 chartered ecologists in Ireland, okay? And just to give you an idea of the sort of career progression that we offer to our members, from student up to full membership and fellow and chartered ecologist. And we are an institute that very much supports and develops our members in offering training and support in terms of, we're particularly looking at how to support our early career professionals at the moment. So the climate emergency and biodiversity crisis, well, CIEEM, as with a lot of other organizations, declared a climate emergency and biodiversity crisis in September 2019 and produced this declaration and a call to action. And within this, and this is something I'm going to come back to quite a lot tonight, is that a statement that nature-based solutions must play a key role in mitigating and against and adapting to climate change. And this is something that is increasingly being acknowledged, is that the two are intertwined, both in terms of impact, but also in terms of potential measures that we can take, both in terms of dealing with climate change, but also in terms of amelioration of the impacts as well. And this is something that's certainly being looked at and acknowledged on a wider stage, and being really adopted as a standard practice, that nature-based solutions are very much a way forward for all disciplines, if you like. And what CIEEM is doing is been undertaking a proactive approach to advancing nature-based solutions and their incorporation into the mainstream. For example, we've produced policy and briefing papers to actually provide information to sectors such as the engineering sector on what nature-based solutions are, why they're important, and how to, and those sorts of ideas. And in fact, very recently, a couple of weeks ago, we held our annual conference in Ireland on nature-based solutions opportunities in a time of biodiversity crisis and climate emergency. And we had a very successful conference a couple of weeks ago. And what we're trying to do through those sorts of activities is to build capacity to move nature-based solutions and general work for biodiversity enhancement forwards in Ireland. And so we're delighted to be represented here tonight. So in terms of looking forwards to solutions, the sorts of things that we might be talking about are consideration of biodiversity impacts at an early stage. And I'm going to gripe about this and moan about this, and but no, I'm not. We're looking forward to solutions. So we're going to be talking about that in a minute. We're also going to be talking about incorporation of biodiversity enhancement opportunities into all projects. And as Laurence was saying earlier, mitigation is no longer enough. Enhancement. We can't just go down the road of just allowing things just get a little bit worse, trying to minimize the amount that they get worse. We need to be taking real measures for enhancement. And I want to talk about employment of nature-based solutions as well. So looking at these in turn. Consideration of biodiversity impacts at an early stage. Biodiversity loss is often a result of lack of consideration or knowledge. Okay, so whenever you have a developer proposal or an engineering idea or whatever, if you don't look to see what's there, you will never know what you've lost. And it's amazing the number of people who come to me. We were talking about curlews earlier. The number of people who, during my career, when I've been walking around farms and the countryside, the number of farmers who've said, we used to see curlews everywhere and now we just don't see them anymore. I don't understand what's happened to them. And it is often a lack of knowledge of what the connections are between what we're doing and what we're impacting on. Okay, so biodiversity is absolutely the knowledge of what you've got there. Early surveys of areas are absolutely fundamental to taking action. Okay, it is always not only, as Laurence was saying, replacement habitats do not have the value or that the original habitats will do, and often they're in the wrong place, and I'm going to be talking about that a bit later on. But often it's more cost effective to leave what's there than to accept loss and actually replace things. The other thing to remember is and I think this is something that's come through more in lockdown, and this is something that gets forgotten about a lot when we're talking about biodiversity, is the value of biodiversity for people's mental health. The amount of the times we heard on the radio that everyone's turned to bird watching and this, that, and the other, and maybe because they weren't able to go very far, but actually, you know what? A lot of people found a lot of appreciation for wildlife and biodiversity. And it does have an impact on people's mental health. So there's no reason why we shouldn't be thinking about it at an early stage as a fundamental part of any new proposal. Also, consideration of biodiversity requirements too late can lead to it being an add-on or token. Okay, so there are those big issues that we need to think about. It's, if often, for example, I think it was Laurence saying earlier, talking about hedgerows, for example. There's no point saying, well, oh, okay, we haven't really thought about that, so we'll keep that area there, and it's lost all its function. There's a bit of scrap of hedgerows it left in the middle of the site, and I know that anybody who works as a heritage officer or in a local authority is absolutely fed up with proposals coming to them that have some little vestige left within the actual development that's being submitted that has no ecological value because you've taken away the function. We're going to talk about that. So, how to? Engineers and biodiversity professionals, we need to work together to identify constraints at the early stage and understand ecological function. And it's very interesting that I've grown used to calling them constraints. And actually, I think maybe we need to accept that we need to change the language. Maybe these are opportunities. Maybe we just need to say, we're not looking at constraint studies, we're looking at biodiversity studies. And then we will start to look at how biodiversity can be integrated into projects and proposals. And it's the same way when you look at the way that arterial drainage is talked about, and OPW has, under the Drainage Act, talked about benefiting lands. Well, maybe lands would benefit from less drainage as well. So there are certain things that we need to really think about the language of. And we need to understand ecological function. There's no point just saving small areas, and this allows for much better and more appropriate mitigation, okay? We also need to work together to manage client expectations. And I think, for example, if you have a new solar farm being looked at where there is, the intention is that the area will be managed as a meadow afterwards, because that works very well with solar farms. But then you realize that the area that's being managed as a meadow is a 2-meter strip around the outside of the solar array, because the client is really wants to maximize their returns. And by the time you've got the ecologist involved, it's not really mitigation, it's not really working. So we need to think about things like that. We also need to think about ramifications of design decisions, especially changes. For example, the number of times, I don't know if there are people here who've worked on wind farm developments, but the number of times, for example, that the specification for a wind farm proposal changes after initial surveys have been done and to a larger turbine size, and that facilitates or requires a real significant change in the facilities that are the haul roads, etc., that are needed to actually access it. And suddenly, all the work that you did earlier on then is actually undone by these changes. And I think there's a need for both biodiversity professionals and engineers to work together to manage client expectations, because often it is the biodiversity professional, the ecologist, who is digging in their heels and seen as dragging the project back. Okay, so incorporation of biodiversity enhancement opportunities. Biodiversity enhancement, biodiversity loss is often the result of small losses, and therefore small gains can add up. Don't underestimate how valuable small gains can still be, okay? Small features can provide significant biodiversity, especially when they're in the right place, okay? And when they're in the right place, then the design of the small feature can have a benefit that is beyond the actual value of itself, for example, okay? So, sorry, for example, if you have a swales or a water feature adjacent to an existing biodiverse rich area, then the benefit of the actual feature that you're putting there extends to the wider biodiverse rich area, rather than if it was contained within a development. So again, the only way that's going to happen is if the ecologist and the engineer are working together right at the beginning to try and maximize the biodiversity enhancement. Okay, so for example, right location we need to choose, we're just talking about, but also management and maintenance is absolutely crucial to think about right at the design stage. For example, if you are going to be putting in a suds pond that is optimal for wildlife, how are you going to get in and clean it out to allow it to still fulfill a suds function as well as a wildlife function, if you haven't thought about the design and the need to actually get machinery in there without causing damage to the site itself? So thinking about those sorts of things. Think about a road verge, for example. How many of you have seen a big cut on a new road that is full of wildflowers because it's been sown with a wildflower mix, and then 2 years later it's got less wildflowers, and then 4 years down the line it has got no wildflowers? And the reason for that is probably one, it was spread with a sort of a nutrient-rich topsoil, and two, it's too steep to actually get on and manage. because these wildflower meadows are often, their benefits are built on their old hay meadows and they have to be managed. So, you know, getting a biodiversity professional together with an engineer in the first place, you might come up with an idea to step those areas beside the road, and you could avoid the topsoil and manage client expectations. But you might say, well, look, you won't get really an amazing array of flowers for the first 3 or 4 years, but it will really last. Those sorts of things, and that's what we think about as the optics. You won't necessarily have a bloom in the flowers as soon as the road opens, but we will have a long-term benefit. So getting the right decisions and making the hard decisions. And the important thing to remember is that biodiversity value of features is often a product of factors such as substrate, exposure, drainage, or often lack of, profile, orientation, things, those sorts of things. And really understanding that, and it's no accident that I've said it in those ways, because really these are things that can be engineered for new features, and understanding this can be the result in the best enhancement opportunities. I'd be very happy to talk about those sorts of things as we go on, but I do want to talk about nature-based solutions. And for those who are saying, well, if we're talking about nature-based solutions, why have I got a picture of flooding? Well, that's a floodplain. That's a floodplain doing what a floodplain should do, which is allowing the water to flood into it, which allows water to then flow back slowly back into the river channel, avoiding downstream flooding. And you know, you've got your housing on the left there, away from the floodplain, and a floodplain on the right. And as soon as you start putting, stopping the water from getting to that floodplain, that's when we get into the situation where not only are we dredging in towns, and we are putting up increasingly expensive flood defense, hard flood defenses in towns, but also we're on a hiding to nothing, because all we're doing is shifting the water further downstream faster. So thinking about these things at the start is really, really important. Okay, so nature-based solutions have the potential to reduce climate emissions. I'm conscious that I'm running over time here, but has the potential to ameliorate climate impacts in particular, has the potential to reduce costs over traditional approaches, and it has the potential to have health and well-being benefits, all while benefiting biodiversity. Some examples that we might be thinking about is wetlands to ameliorate flooding and attenuate flows, whether they're in the upper catchment areas or in urban areas. We're thinking about coastal and river erosion protection, whether we're talking about, for example, use of marram grass planting, whether we're talking about willows in rivers. We're talking about coastal realignment, and a crucial thing with this coastal realignment is a massive thing now in GB, and I'm looking to sort of zoom in on this now. You can see this is on the east coast of Britain, because they've got a particular problem there with virtual isostatic change. So since the Ice Age, that part of the land is actually falling as well as sea level rises, sea levels rising. But that area in the center there, which is the managed realignment area, is an engineered thing, because as the areas to the bottom left have been drained, they have dropped down in height. And so they're lower than sea level in many cases. And so what you need for these managed realignment areas is to actually create them in such a way that you allow the substrate to build up using a process that they call warping up. So allows the sediment to fall out. Or in some cases, for the bigger projects, they're actually using substrate from massive building projects, such as tunneling projects, to actually undertake the works there. So great options there. Floodplain restoration, and I think this is something that we're going to be looking at more and more and more, because really, in many ways, that is the only way we're going to reduce the likelihood of increased flooding in a lot of our towns and villages. especially in the lower parts of our river systems. And then, of course, we have sustainable drainage systems, excuse me, whether they're green roofs or permeable paving or retention ponds. And the useful thing with the retention ponds is, again, with the wildlife benefit, is all about profiling. It's all about having it engineered, the benefits engineered into the profiling in the first place. Excuse me. So, bit of a whistle-stop tour, I'm afraid, but I do want to talk about collaboration, because there's no doubt that the future requires engineers and biodiversity professionals to work together effectively, and I'm delighted to have this opportunity to say thank you to inviting me and to offer out the potential for a more formalized way for us to collaborate. It's absolutely essential that biodiversity is viewed as an integral part of better engineering options, not as a constraint to be just considered in the first instance. And it's also important that engineers and biodiversity professionals need to start a dialogue to better understanding the needs of each discipline and push the envelope together. I mean, for example, whenever I'm on a wind farm and there are, I'm looking at the size of the hard stands that are being put down there, and there are, I'm told that it has to be like that in order to for blade set down areas. And then you start to ask about soft blade set down areas, and I need to be informed about the engineering issues in order to try and push my argument forwards, in the same way that engineers need to be informed about biodiversity issues, so that we can actually collaborate and not just be on the opposite side of the fence. So next steps, better training for both disciplines, and certainly we'd be very keen to get involved with Engineers Ireland, early and open consideration in all projects, and a dual approach for pushing changes needed to deal with biodiversity loss and promotion of nature-based solutions. The sorts of things we're talking about there might be, for example, insurance. If insurance is difficult to get for soft engineering options, then maybe we need to be pushing those sorts of things together. And maybe we should need to be pushing together to actually get biodiversity enhancement written into construction contracts and things like that, so that they are not lost. A lot of the good work in planning is not lost during the construction phase. Bit of a whistle-stop tour, but I hope that's been of use, and I hope there's some questions that I can have a look at. Discussions, workshops on developing knowledge on how biodiversity protection, enhancement, and sustainable engineering methods can be developed. Yes, important as well. So thanks very much. I just put Liz O'Reilly's details there. She is our project officer for Ireland, and she'd be a very good point of contact for taking things forward. So thanks very much, everybody.